un altro episodio di Digital Download. Oops. Good afternoon, good morning, and good day, wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. Now globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio through IBGR, the world's #1 business talk, news, and strategy radio network. Today, we're exploring how technology can ease the emotional and practical burdens associated with loss. We have a special guest, Natalia Pazzaglia, to help us with the discussion. Natalia is the CEO and founder of Legacy Compass. But before we bring Natalia on, let's go around the set, which is going to be quite short today, and introduce Adam.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite. I haven't been crying. I suffer a little bit with hay fever, and it just seems to be particularly bad today. During that intro, I love the fact that we are the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. I love it, and I love the fact that we've had such an amazingly diverse group of guests that have come on to share their expertise and knowledge with people. Everything from entrepreneurship and marketing through to worm farms. So it's lovely when it's always every day's a school day, isn't it? We're always learning things with this. So
exactly, and that's really great to have that on Fridays. A little bit of fresh air.
Absolutely.
After a very tough week, probably for most of us.
Thank you.
So as I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Natalia Pazzaglia. Natalia's experience in developing tech for good platforms and her expertise in storytelling for social impact make her uniquely positioned to offer valuable insights on this important topic. Let's bring her on. Natalia,
hello.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Natalia, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what led you where you are today.
Yes, thank you, Adam and Bertrand, for the invite. I'm very happy to be here talking about such an important topic for me and for what we are navigating. So my background is actually in politics and international law. I started off in international cooperation, and I quite soon moved to business development and social impact, which led me to acquire a number of different competencies in fundraising, partnership development, and startup world. And ultimately, there was a moment, there were many moments in which my personal life intertwined with my professional life, and that led me to really ask myself what I wanted to do with my career. And I guess my creativity and innovation, which has always been like very important core values that I have, were kind of mixed with a personal situation of being the informal caregiver of my mom that was diagnosed with cancer when I was 16. And so I literally accompanied her for a long journey that lasted about 16 years. And that really made me see what it means to deal with end of life from young age and as a young professional and in families. And that's how I really started thinking about, like the word of caregiving, the word of end of life. My mom was very strong and she really fought her battle. But ultimately, she died 4 years ago. And once she did, I was confronted not only with the emotional pain of losing somebody we love, but also with the enormous amount of administrative and financial decision that you need to take in a very short time, many, many times when you are not prepared, and with the unfairness of such a process. And that was what led me to really ask myself, is this only me? Is this only me suffering so much for this?
Okay. Thanks for that, Natalia. So let's start with the foundational question. What role does technology play in making end-of-life support more accessible, especially in underserved areas?
I guess I always like to say that technology is a tool. So I see it as a medium to really help us as human beings access a number of services and a number of resources that might not be directly available. So I'm just going to give you my example. When my mom died, I was in a small village in Italy with COVID. So there was no support available in person, and all the healthcare system was completely understaffed, as unfortunately looks like we might be in 5-10 years with the aging population that we're seeing in Europe. So I couldn't absolutely find any sort of in-person support. But not only, it comes down, and we've seen this in Legacy Compass with more than 200 interviews, that when you are faced with loss, you tend to be very, not shy, but like you might be more introverted than normal. You might not actually want to meet people in person because you're not ready, because these are difficult topics, because, sometimes just bringing yourself out of the house for 2 or 3 hours of, traveling plus meeting people is a bit too much. Even in our busy days, it's too much. So I guess the beauty of technology is, on one side, the fact that it makes accessible many, many different services, like over a vast, geographically. So anybody can actually be able to access a service, whether they live in a tiny little town in Italy or in London or in the US. But I guess the other point is also that technology allows us to come as we are and to decide whether we want to show up or not. So turning on and off camera is sometimes one of those things that people extremely appreciate when they are distressed. And this allows them to be in a place where they feel safer than the possibility, the necessity of showing up as you are, and you might not want to be seen in that moment.
Mm. So I guess that one of, whenever, and I lost my father 8 years ago.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. I find humour is a great way of dealing with things. So I say I lost my father, by which I mean he died, not he walked off in a supermarket and we couldn't find him, because it kind of lightens the load for me to add a bit of humour with these things. But at that point, it was difficult because there was no clear path to understand who we were able to talk to get unbiased help and guidance for the process that we need to go through. Because often, if you are bereaved, it's maybe the first bereavement you're dealing with. So if you've dealt with 10 bereavements, you know what you need to do. If you're dealing with one bereavement, the first one, it's like, okay, well, how do you arrange a funeral? How do you arrange a burial? How do you sort out the will or life insurance or whatever those things may be? And I guess that the part of the question is how do we put that into a place where people can access it so they're aware of it? Because it's all very well saying, well, there's help available, but only if you know where to go for that help.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. But I guess the second thing also is if I need emotional support through that period, how can I access that as an individual? Because I think perhaps one of the challenges for people is that I don't want to go to a group where I hear everybody else that's sad and upset and bereaved. I want to talk to somebody that listens to what I have to say. So how do we reconcile those two things, and how do we educate people about the route out of this?
Yeah, thanks for. Should I answer?
Please.
Yeah. And thanks for the question. And I think it's where also like technology plays a role, in the sense that so what you said about where to find the information, I guess there's even another point which might even be a precondition, which is which information is necessary for you. Because maybe you don't need to know everything, and knowing everything will just overwhelm you in a moment in which you are already overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So I guess there's a point, which is, if you've never been through that kind of thing, as you said, because you might experience a loss only once, hopefully, before you turn 50 or 60, then you have no idea what you are navigating. It's a little bit like building a house without knowing whether you need a wall, whether you need a window, whether you need the roof. Like literally, you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you might look for things that actually are not relevant for you, because maybe there's something about the decision that the person that is died already made about wanting to be buried or cremated, and you have no idea where to look for that decision if you don't know that there's a will or that there are like other dispositions that can be made, for example. And also maybe you don't know that there's an insurance provider that can actually help you in X, Y, and Z. So one precondition that actually technology can help us understand is profiling people. So like really understanding who we are talking with and which type of information they might need or they might not need. Because, for example, if you live in the same house, it is very common that you might already know many different things. But if you live abroad in another country, you're going to have a lot of legal consequences just because of taxes, just because like of different names that needs to be changed if you happen to inherit properties. So it really are like, it's really a matter of also not just about, like where do I find information, but what information is relevant for me. Because the one thing you don't want to do is like add overwhelming in a moment in which you are already overwhelmed and you're processing emotional pain and administrative load and financial decision all together.
Yeah.
But then I also think, like your second question, like about, like the kind of support. Again, I think here it's fun, something that I found quite fascinating, which has to do with two different things. I think one side is that self-reflection. Like not everybody is aware of what he or she might need, because again, we might not have been in a traumatic situation before, so we might not know that we need one-to-one therapy, or we are absolutely unwilling to do that because we would rather be in a group of peers, because being in a group of peers will make us feel less alien and will make us feel more supported. But do you know that already? Many times you actually don't.
No, absolutely.
So what we try to do is also like understand who we're talking with. And there are many different ways in which now, like with AI and with technology, it is possible like to gauge certain things. So of course there's no certainty. It's not like we cannot assess properly, but I mean properly in the sense of being 100% sure, but we can suggest things that will make people think about their response and their needs in ways in which they might not have considered. Because you would be surprised by the fact that some people want to talk with a professional, but some people are intimidated by talking with a professional and they would rather talk with a peer.
Yeah, I mean that does make sense, and it's interesting because as you were talking, then you were mentioning certain things. It was triggering all sorts of further questions in my mind, and I think that one of the challenges, and I know this from my father, one of the challenges when you're arranging these things is that you want to create an event for the funeral. I'm thinking you want to create an event that you think reflects well on the person because their friends and your friends are going to be there. But the wishes that they have, and this wasn't the case with my father, but I think this will be the case with my mother, who's quite old. She's kind of she said, this is what I want. And I think this is what I want. I think that's a really bad idea. And part of this is about honoring them, but part of this is about recognizing that actually they're gone, so they don't care. So the funeral and the party afterwards is for the benefit of the people that are still around. So it's like navigating that is a really difficult ethical thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I could cite many talks that we had with funeral directors telling us that a lot of people ended up choosing the most expensive coffin because they had no instruction and they felt very guilty in choosing something that was cheaper. So they ended up spending a lot of money, potentially for no benefit, just because they didn't want to deal with the shame or the guiltiness of having made like a cheap choice on something so intimate and delicate that should be, I mean, at the end of the day, like when we marry, we spend months planning for a marriage.
Yeah.
And we spend like not even a day like planning for our end, which again is, as you said, is about also celebrating, the person. So more and more, for example, there are people that do their funeral in life as a way of telling people, this is who I am and this is how I would like to be remembered. Because I guess it's true what you said, like it is true, like all rituals, like for centuries, were done not for the person that was gone, but for the person left behind.
Yeah.
And to be like a kick-starting point for creating a community of support around them. But I guess what you said, I think it goes into really some personal questions about, can you deal with awareness/emotional load of making your own choices against the choices of somebody with whom potentially you are not on the same page? Like, can you, because I think, and here's where I think it's very important what you said, because you would be surprised like to see how many people have been regretting decisions that they've taken in a very short amount of time. Because the truth is, for example, I come from a Catholic country, so funerals happens in 2 days, like within 48 hours. And in those 48 hours, you have to take an amount of decision that we have quantified in more than 50. And many of those decisions are decisions you're going to go back and back and back in your mind in the following months, if not years. So you do want to be at peace with them, because they are going to impact like how you perceive yourself in a very crucial moment of your identity.
Is there a way? Oh, sorry, Adam. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's. I guess that's. I hadn't thought about that. The fact that you go back and you revisit that event many times, and if you've done something that perhaps you hadn't thought through properly, you could have regrets coming up. But interesting that you said the funeral. About doing it when you're alive, and it happened to a friend of my wife's. She was diagnosed and given maybe 18 months to live. So she arranged her funeral, and it was amazing because she was an amazing woman, and nobody really knew what she'd done. She was in her 80s, I think. And when she was a young woman, she left school and then she went and traveled around the world, and she had an affair with a ship's captain and was and it's like all of this stuff where you just go, oh my God, that's amazing. But she was there, so she got up and she told her story, and everybody that knew her got to see her in a new light. And she kind of quite flippantly said, well, if I'm going to have a big party, I want to make sure I'm at my party rather than not at my party, which I thought was a really and I've never heard this before. I thought that was a really lovely idea, but that supposes that you can see the end coming, doesn't it?
Yeah, which a lot of people don't want to.
Well, I mean, with my father, he was in his early 80s and he fell and broke his hip, and he went into hospital for an emergency hip replacement. And when you're elderly and you have that operation, most people don't come out of hospital. So for 2 weeks, he was up and down and up and down and up and down, and then he died. So there was no opportunity to create that environment for him. But I guess that as always, it's a case that it's the planning and the execution of these things is left for the people that are left behind, isn't it? And even if you're going to be passing away in 6 months' time, the fact that you're passing away probably means that you're neither in the headspace nor physically able to actually make a lot of these decisions yourself.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I was just reflecting on what was said so far, but hopefully, and that will come for me as well. How do you trigger the discussion with the ones that are gonna leave to have that discussion and get prepared, basically, if we can get prepared, because I think we can't, but at least at the discussion.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Is something we are breaking our head on. I mean, so the first thing I want to say is that I agree with Adam in the sense that the percentage of people that come to us that are the ones that are going to die is minimal. So the truth is that the person that will find the strength, the willingness to do the process and to prepare tend to be the caregivers. So they tend to be, when I say caregiver, I don't necessarily think about somebody that will become a nurse. I'm just thinking about informal caregiving, which many times is what we all end up doing when our parents are aging. So means, taking more care of them, going visit them more often, sometimes accompanying them to medical checkups, etc. So I don't necessarily think about somebody who becomes a nurse who's 24/7 with them. And so what happened is that what we would like is that conversation can at least start within yourself, because we have no control about how the other person will react. So, for example, my mom, she was diagnosed with cancer and she had cancer for 16 years. She never talked about that. She got to talk about death, I think, 2 days before dying. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me because I would have loved to talk with her about these things, but she absolutely didn't want to. So I had to respect that, right? And I went into therapy to understand how to respect that. And, there were a lot of consequences for me as well to have that big denial while seeing certain things in terms of, as Adam said, physical deterioration, etc. So I think what we've seen is that, unfortunately, as human beings, we cannot control how other people are going to behave. So we can't force somebody who was diagnosed or somebody who's going to die to actually talk about these things. But what you can do is you can start your own conversation with yourself about how you want to show up. Do I feel I'm going to be somebody that will regret not to have asked my mom about her childhood? Do I feel like somebody that will have financial problems if I end up having to pay X amount of taxes? Can I somehow understand what's the range of taxes I might end up paying? Can I prepare? So what we see is that what we want to do is we want to bring some clarity, and we want to bring some peace of mind, and also we really want to use this time, which is a precious time, to really make people ask themselves, okay, if this person I love is going to die, what are the things I would potentially regret? Because maybe it's not asking them about the bank accounts, at the end you'll sort that out. Maybe it's about asking them, okay, how was the love between you and my dad? Like, what are the things you would like to tell me that one day I can tell to my grandchildren, or to, this kind of things that you're never going to have a chance to go back and ask, basically. Or as Adam said, maybe nobody would know about the story of the love affair on the ship, these are the kind of things that, in a world in which seems to be all about money, what I can tell you is that people are not about money. Like, when it comes to big thing, like, it actually very emotional.
So how do you move the conversation to that place? Because the conversation about money is a relatively easy one, because certainly my parents, they were not rich, but they wanted to make sure that they left a legacy for children, and so that and power of attorney and that are quite easy things to arrange because they're very factual. But stuff like you said about, tell me about the love between you and my father. Isn't there a risk that makes it sound like you're expecting them to be dead this time tomorrow?
So I was smiling because I think when we navigate loss is like entering into the full human experience and entering into like one of the biggest fear. And I think in front of fear, we're just very naked. So we can see all our colors in a way. So I'm Italian, and I can tell you that, so we have used cards like these ones to start and see how people would react. So when, Bertrand was asking me, how do you start a conversation? We have created cards that people could use to ask questions like, have you made a will? Where is it? Or do you have any family members that you miss? So the cards are of two different colors, and this is just an MVP, a minimum viable product that we were testing. So the colors are emotional purple, practical yellow, because we have seen that people have two different coping strategies. Some people need to go to emotion first and get reassured, and then they go into the practicalities. And some people will never go into the emotions, as you said, because talking about bank accounts is easier. I can tell you that in Italy, these type of cards are just over. People don't get to talk about money. And I suppose France might be similar. Like, we are quite okay in talking about love, in talking about childhood. But if somebody was to ask about money, it would be like, what? Like, even for like in a relationship between like son and father, in many cases it's considered to be like an overstepping, because you are asking somebody like more senior than you to share some very private information. So for example, it depends on the culture. So in the UK is the opposite. As you said, I think like in our experience, like the way in which loss and end of life is navigated is a little bit more about risk management. So you want to be prepared. You want to get to know that your loved ones are, financially okay, they're gonna find the documents, etc. But for example, in Italy, like this kind of approach is completely I guess
irrelevant, irrespective.
Irrelevant, yes, because you don't get there. Like there's like it's just like too much of a taboo, and it's not perceived as something that you do need to do, because you're gonna lose a lot of money if not.
But I was so back on technology, because I was just thinking, when we discuss about our memories, and potentially our stories we want to share. A lot of that is actually on digital media right now. The more we're going to move forward, the more it's going to be the case. So, any best practice in this area?
I guess it boils down to the type of personality you have and how much you like to share. Of course, there are many talks about digital legacy, about what it means, to choose somebody that will take over your social media accounts if you're not there anymore. Some platform like Meta do ask you for contacts that you want to make a replacement for you in case. I do think that how we show up in the world, and when I say the world, I also mean the digital world, is a little bit of a reflection on who we are. So some people will like to have their whole private stories showcased online or showed online, and other people won't. So I guess, again, this is like a very individual choice. Definitely as in a good practice. A good practice is definitely to do put down that contact that you would like to allow to be able to access your social media if anything's happened, because otherwise it's just gonna be blocked. So
yeah, I was also thinking about bridging the gap between the generations, because I guess a lot of that, a lot of these memories. And if I take myself, I've not printed a picture for a very long time, and I also do have plenty of videos. So I was just thinking, how do you get that organized? That's probably a very light discussion compared to the ones we had so far.
But I think an interesting question here is that we live in a very digital world, and whilst you are alive, you obviously have certain boundaries that you operate within. So I don't talk about these things. I don't show these elements of my life. But we spend a huge amount of time coaching people on being effective digitally. And one of the things that I see time and time again is that people are often scared to show themselves And the reason they're scared to show themselves is because I think every one of us has an underlying belief that actually we're not a good person. So I don't want to show myself because actually you'll see that I'm not a good person, or whatever the fear is that you have. And I think that when that fear is removed because they're dead, maybe we should encourage families to say, this person didn't share how wonderful they were to the world as a whole when they were alive, but maybe now they have nothing to be scared of anymore. Maybe they should, because I often think that we're all kind of programmed by our upbringing and our experiences. And if you're an elderly person, you have no experience of promoting yourself necessarily. You have no experience of sharing these things, either because you just haven't done it, or because you believe that you, and I think this is the important one, you believe that you have nothing to say that the world needs to hear.
Yeah.
And often old people do. Often they do have something to say, and they can be incredibly inspirational. And they're almost like, by not sharing this stuff, they're robbing the world of the chance to hear how great they were.
Yeah, I mean, I teach vulnerability and authenticity, so like I'm with you. I do think that this is one of the big lessons, that we are like Legacy Compass as a mission, and the mission is to transform loss into a tool for better lives and more compassionate companies. So definitely, I think to understand that we are all gonna die, that's the truth, but also we are all monsters, right? We're all monsters. There are parts of us that are monsters. And when you get to see that, and when you get to see, like also the inevitability of being good and bad, which we all are, I guess it frees up a lot of parts of you that were not allowed to be before. And so one thing that we see happening over and over and over is that after a big loss, people make some very important life choices that they've been postponing for years because they were too afraid to listen to themselves first and to follow their desires. So sadly, when you see that, we're all gonna die, then it's like, okay, maybe this career change is time that I do it. Because at the end of the day, I'm not gonna bring X amount of money to the tomb, and I'd better live like a happier life. Or maybe I better spend more time with my friend or my family. So I do believe, and we have seen it happening, that, for example, one thing that loss brings to life is more authenticity, in this being also allowing yourself to be the person you want to be, even with, or maybe because of also your weaknesses, because you're fine to accept that finally.
Yeah, and do you find that that this is quite normal for people to have like an epiphany when they go through this loss? They're better able to and I don't mean this to be negative, but they're better able to see the futility of life. At the end of the day, we are born, we live, we die. Some of us live a long time, some of us don't. And at the end of it, actually, very rarely do we get the opportunity to make a real difference. Some people do, but very, very few people do. So actually, maybe living, maybe seeing that you should be, as you said, living for yourself. So do you find that this has this triggering effect on people?
If you were to ask me this question, I think a year ago, I would have said yes. I think with further user research and really like also being into some more, I guess, deep understanding and deep listening to the experience, I'd say it depends on the level of self-awareness and self-reflection. Because again, like loss is a life-changing event, and it goes back whether you want to embrace that or not. Some people will just pass through the practicalities, close the drawer, and move on. Moving on means that, as it often happens in therapy and like with psychological research, when they get to lose something else, whether it's a job, a relationship, or another person, they will not only have to grieve that loss, but also the previous one that they had not grieved. But it really depends on whether you want to, allow yourself to see what's happening. So if you do, there's, this part which is very scary, which is grief and sadness, is things that we don't want to feel. But unfortunately or fortunately, many, many times when we do go into things we don't want to see, we actually also understand what we really want to do. And that's where the epiphany happens, which is like, okay, I can't survive this. Like if I go there, I can actually survive and heal. And in this healing, I will actually understand what I truly want to do. And I will find somehow the courage or the strength to do it better. So, yeah, I guess in my case, for example, I lost my dad when I was 10. So I think that losing somebody at such a young age definitely made me into a different person. I am very, very sure I would be completely different if I hadn't had that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people, until they face these challenges, they really have no idea how they. So before my dad died, I had never really faced bereavement. I'd lost a friend who was killed when a ship he was on sank. And I was in my 20s when that happened. And I lost my grandfather, but I didn't really know him that well. We didn't see them that often. So I lost my grandfather maybe when I was 10. And that's it. So nobody that's really, really close to me had I been through this until my father. And and I think that it's very easy to think how this may or may not affect you. And then when you face it, it may affect you in a very different way.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
We have a comment from the audience, Adam. I'll let you go through this. That's Luan.
So Jan says, on the flip side, there are many who think that they have something to share and they shouldn't. However, more directly to your point, how many times have you heard somebody say, the deceased would have loved to have heard those lovely things people are saying about them? And I think that's comes back again to that kind of have the funeral while you're still alive, if you get the opportunity, because you get to see all of these people, how much they really love you and how much you matter to them, and see all the lives that you have affected. Because let's be honest, it doesn't matter whether you are speaking to millions from the stage, or whether you've got a very close group of friends who you work with in the factory. You are going to have a major impact on people's lives somewhere. And hearing that can be very rewarding and show you that you're on the right path, potentially, I suppose.
And also give you strength.
Yeah.
That it can be very lonely, like being diagnosed or, being like in a moment of pain. And as you said, unfortunately, like most of the cases, if you do have a situation in which you're gonna die, it's a very lonely place to be. So actually knowing that there are lots of people that are cheering for you and that have really, enjoyed your presence and that have been changed sometimes by you, like it's amazing. And I think I had the same experience with my mom when she died. I received a number of messages that also showed me parts of her that I had no idea about.
Yeah, but I do think that there's, and you said about in Italian culture, you would never talk to people about money, for example, because that's a taboo. But I think there'd be lots of other things that you wouldn't talk about because it's either likely to be an uncomfortable conversation, or you feel that you're prying, or you fear that they might feel that you're prying into their lives. But knowing those things, I can ask you while you're alive. I can't ask you when you're not. So, I mean, what advice would you give to people, when they're surrounded by people that they love? What advice would you give them about how they can steer the conversation to be fact-finding about these people? Because a lot of times people, and I see this in my day-to-day life with the people that I coach, very few people realize just how wonderful they are. That doesn't mean they're perfect, but many, many people have incredible strengths and are incredibly great individuals, and they have no idea. They have no idea how wonderful they are. And hearing this about people, particularly if it's someone that matters to you, would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So, well, it's a tough one. It's a tough question. So I think first, I guess it's a little bit like who you're talking to, right? So I think it's a little bit like having first an understanding of how far you can go. Because one thing you don't want to do, I think, is scaring people off, especially if this person is somebody you love. I do think that finding the right moment is key. So having this kind of conversation in a moment in which you're both relaxed, or you are actually doing something together, can be a very good thing. So when I say doing something together, we have seen that, for example, shifting the attention to something else is actually something that facilitates more difficult conversation. So say, take your mom for a walk, or take her to a cooking class, and then like softly start asking her about, Mom, have you learned anything about money in your life? Is there any advice, that you would like to pass on? Because, and also one thing that we see being quite useful is asking advice. So for example, make them feel important in saying, I have this problem. This is a financial problem, and I'm sharing it with you. And what often happens is that when we share first, then also the other person open up. So I'm not saying that we should say, hey, I have this bank account and there's X, Y, and Z in the bank account, but just making it about a sharing moment rather than an interrogation, or, like something in which you want to extract facts or information, but more like a chance to connect. Say, this is my experience. I would like to understand, if you have any advice, which turns out a lot of older people actually want to give as a way of caring, and or what's your take, like what's your experience with that? And you see that when you open up, a lot of the time also the other person does, but asking the question directly is sometimes very scary to hear. So definitely the right, like understanding who you're talking to and which are the boundaries. Like I knew I would never get to understand about my mom's bank account, because she never ever shared anything about that. So it was really difficult that she would do in such a moment. But the second point is, okay, how can I make, like this situation being comfortable? Maybe this person loves to walk, or they love to cook, or you can get them to a holiday. So it's also about, finding the right moment in which we allow ourselves to open up. And that's really important. And then, like do it first. So share first, and then they will many times.
No, that's great advice. We've got a couple of great
we have
so this is a fantastic quote. At the root of most fear is what other people will think of us. Absolutely. And this is terrifying for most people, and helping to break down this barrier, hopefully when people are still alive, is great. But his next comment, honoring legacy is better than crying. Absolutely. Because I think that one of the things that certainly that I learned from my father's funeral was, clearly I cried. Lots of people cried. He was a great guy and everybody loved him. But hearing people talk about what he meant to them and how much they loved him was a really happy experience, because you only ever judge your relationship with somebody, don't you? And you don't know how other people feel about them. And hearing that, having that put out there so that you could realize that this interaction was not a unique one, that everybody felt this way, was incredibly comforting to me.
So I might just slightly disagree on this.
Okay.
Because I think that there's no right or wrong way to grieve, and there's no right or wrong way to honor. Like it's often said, like that the pain of losing somebody is also, like a good measure of how much you love them. So I wouldn't necessarily say that somebody that is going to cry, for a full year and being in pain for a full year should feel wrong because they're doing that, because I think it's their way to cope, like it's their way to feel that love and that loss. So I think that it depends like on the person you are and how you process emotions. And for some people, it's going to be easier to straight away look at the positive and just like use the positive to bring you forward. But other people need to be like, and I'm definitely one of them. Like my first few months after my mom died, I think I don't know how many kilos I lost, and I was a completely different person. But it was necessary because I had to be in that pain, and it was what I needed to do in order to then move on. So I'd say it really depends. Like some people will need to cry also for a long time. I mean, normally is like, as in therapy or in psychology, like the first year is considered to be a year in which you are very likely to be slightly depressed. So it's a full year. So it does take time. But, like it's, again, like losing somebody is a very individual experience. So it triggers so many coping mechanisms that I wouldn't be able to necessarily say what's right and wrong, but more is about, okay, can you try to understand what you need enough to allow yourself to do that for yourself?
And I guess also it potentially depends on how you lose that person. You know, a sudden death, as opposed to a death where you have some warning, is a very different experience.
Absolutely.
And actually, I think that when, and again, my only reference point is my father, but he went into hospital and it's like, this is a straightforward operation. And after a couple of days, we thought he might not come out. And then he seemed to get a lot better. And then a few days later, it looked like he might not come out again. And then he got a lot better. And then he got a lot worse. And then he died. So during that 2 weeks, I had the opportunity to prepare for the fact that maybe he wasn't going to come out. And obviously, somebody being killed in a car accident or something where they leave the house and perhaps you didn't part with, in the happiest of terms because you'd had an argument or whatever. I cannot begin to imagine what that must be like for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, there's a very, when I said anticipatory grief, like, is that actually when you do have like a terminal illness diagnosis, it is a time in which the people around you, if they want to engage with that news fully, because it is like an unconscious choice whether you want to accept that or not. And it's totally fine also not to accept it. But if you do accept it, then it's a time that is for you to prepare for grieving. And it's a time in which you actually do grieve while having the person still alive, which of course adds a layer of complexity, but also allows you to actually really spend time with that person, like cherish that person until she or he is alive.
Mm. So I guess, we're getting towards the end of the show now. So what resources are available to people? What can they do when they find themselves in this situation? What would you consider would be a good starting point for them to begin this journey?
Well, we are restructuring our platform at the moment. So soon there will be like a new version online in which we do start to ask some questions. I guess the first thing is really trying to understand what are the things you should be thinking about if you want, to engage in this journey. So, like the 10 most important things that you want to think about, both on a practical and emotional level, in case you want to prepare. And that's one side. Another side that you've seen very important is also to connect with people. Because as I said, grief, it's a personal journey. It can be a very lonely journey. And we have seen that having a community or peers that can support you will give you the strength and the energy to keep going in this journey. Because, fortunately or unfortunately, this, as we all know, triggers also like negative feelings and negative thoughts that in our society we are not really used to process. We tend to avoid them completely altogether. So, even to ask somebody to start this journey alone is quite of a big ask. So we have seen that like the combination of, okay, these are the things you might want to think about, but also, okay, here are people that are, similar to you in a similar situation. They want to do this as much as you do. Maybe that's comforting. And then slowly, like accessing professionals or services that can help you in the journey as well.
Mm.
And that's what we do, with Legacy Compass.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, this has been great, Natalia.
Thank you.
Where can we learn more? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me in the website, which is legacycompass.net, and on LinkedIn, Natalia Pazzaglia. I'd say those two are the best channels to understand what we do and where we're at. And we are going to be soon live with online events. As I said, we are redesigning our platform. So yeah, I guess stay tuned.
Okay, so we look forward to see that new platform. Okay, excellent. Well, we now have a newsletter, as everybody knows, so or at least should know. Don't miss an episode. Get the show highlights and the Beyond the Show insights and reminders of upcoming episodes. You may flash the QR code on screen. Here it is. Yes, sorry, Natalia. For some reason, it's right in front of you. Or visit us at digitaldownload.live/newsletter. Natalia, thank you so much for joining us today. And Adam, thank you as well for being with us. And see you next time. Thank you very much.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oops. Here we go.